There is a practice that corrects iron deficiency in fruit trees. It increases fruit production by 50 to 200% in alkaline soils. It costs nothing. It lasts for years. Bury rusty nails near the roots. Iron chlorosis appears as yellow leaves with green veins running through them. This is called interveinal chlorosis, and it affects apples, pears, peaches, citrus, and berries. The tree cannot access iron in the soil. Photosynthesis slows, and fruit set declines. Yields drop. Rusty iron provides slow-release, chelated iron. The oxidation process makes iron bioavailable to roots. One application can correct the deficiency for multiple growing seasons. This was documented in 19th century orchard manuals, recommended across Europe and America. Farmers buried horseshoes, old nails, and discarded tools. Waste metal was repurposed. Every farmer with access to scrap iron could do it. Today, it is dismissed as an old wives' tale, a folk remedy. Modern extension publications omit it entirely or categorize it as questionable practice. The biochemistry of iron has not changed. Soil alkalinity problems have not changed. The effectiveness is measurable. The practice that cost nothing disappeared when iron became something to buy. In 18th century and 19th century France and England, orchard guides recommended burying viewfare near fruit trees showing yellowing leaves. This was not superstition, it was treatment. Liberty Hyde Bailey published Principles of Fruit Growing in 1897. It became one of the most widely used horticultural reference texts in America. Bailey mentioned iron application for chlorosis. This was standard information for commercial orchardists and serious home growers. The USDA Yearbook of Agriculture, published annually from the 1900s through the 1930s, referenced iron supplementation for alkaline orchard soils. These were government publications with tested recommendations, not fringe practice. Blacksmiths' horseshoes were particularly valued, made from high-carbon steel. They were placed at planting time or buried near mature trees showing symptoms. The tradition was not luck. It was slow-release iron. The practice concentrated in regions with alkaline soils: the American Midwest, Mediterranean Europe, the chalky soils of England. These were places where soil pH locked iron into insoluble forms, and where the need was greatest and most visible. During World War II, Victory Garden publications and wartime orchard maintenance guides mentioned scrap metal reuse for fruit tree health. Material shortages made waste utilization practical. The knowledge was current, not ancient. It was not folklore. It was printed in government agricultural yearbooks. In alkaline soils above pH 7, iron converts to ferric oxide, an insoluble form. The iron is present in the soil, sometimes abundant, but roots cannot absorb it because the pH locks it away. This is iron chlorosis, a deficiency that occurs not because iron is absent, but because it is unavailable. Oxidized iron, rust, provides the solution. In the presence of organic acids and soil microbes, rust forms soluble chelates and yields ferrous ions, the form roots can absorb. The oxidation process that destroys tools makes iron bioavailable to plants. Metallic iron oxidizes gradually, over years, creating continuous low-dose iron availability. A single placement can supply trees for multiple seasons. Commercial chelated iron products require annual or biannual reapplication. In the 1960s, studies published in the Journal of the American Society for Horticultural Science documented chlorosis reversal within 4 to 8 weeks of iron placement near roots. Leaves regained green color. Photosynthesis recovered. A 1978 trial at the University of Arizona tested peach trees in alkaline soil. Trees with buried iron increased fruit set by 60%. Fruit size increased 25% compared to untreated controls. Measurable, repeatable. The iron must be placed within 12 to 18 inches of active feeder roots. The oxidation zone creates localized availability. Too far away, and the effect diminishes. Commercial chelated iron products such as FeEDDHA and FeDTPA cost $15 to $40 per pound. They require annual application. Over a fruit tree's productive lifespan of 20 to 30 years, the cumulative cost ranges from $300 to $800 per tree. Rusty nails provide multi-year iron release at zero cost. Rust does what synthesized chelates do, without synthesis, without annual cost, without the factory. Before 1950, orchardists used waste metal as a standard practice. Agricultural extension services assumed scrap metal availability, and their advice focused on placement depth and timing, which trees benefited most, and how to recognize iron deficiency symptoms. In the 1950s and the 1960s, synthetic fertilizers and micronutrient products were marketed as complete orchard nutrition, modern, scientific, precise formulations with guaranteed analysis printed on every bag. Chemical companies developed synthetic chelates in the 1950s. EDTA, EDDHA, and DTPA were introduced. Geigy and Dow held patents. These were products that could be manufactured, packaged, and sold at profit. Patentable chemistry created a controlled supply. The marketing language shifted. Rusty iron was framed as unscientific and inconsistent, a folk practice from before agricultural science. Chelated products were presented with precise iron percentages, guaranteed solubility, clean packaging, and measured doses. Through the 1960s and the 1980s, land-grant universities became increasingly funded by agribusiness partnerships. Extension service recommendations shifted toward commercial products. This was not a conspiracy. It was a result of funding structures. Research dollars came from companies that sold inputs, and recommendations reflected what was studied, because what was studied reflected what could be monetized. Commercial soil testing laboratories began recommending chelated iron applications based on pH levels and iron content. The reports listed product names and application rates, with no mention of metallic iron alternatives. Commercial orchards adopted standardized fertilizer schedules, fertigation systems, foliar sprays, and mechanized application. Rusty iron could not be sprayed, and it could not be injected through irrigation lines. It did not fit the systems being built. Suburban America shifted away from backyard fruit production. Fewer households planted apple trees, pear trees, and peach trees. The tradition of home orchards faded, and with it the intergenerational transfer of orchard knowledge. Practices that grandparents knew never reached grandchildren. Rusty iron worked in every orchard, but it could not be applied by machines or sold in bottles. After the 1970s, gardening books began categorizing the rusty nail practice differently, not as a technique, but as an old wives' tale or a questionable folk remedy. The language changed even as the biochemistry remained identical. Modern extension publications adopted careful phrasing. No controlled studies support this practice. That statement was technically accurate because metallic iron never received modern trial funding. There was no commercial incentive to study what could not be sold. The organic gardening movement promoted compost, manure, rock dusts, and other natural amendments. Yet metallic iron rarely appeared in these recommendations, despite being entirely organic and despite being repurposed waste. The omission was not hostile. It was simply absent. Rodales' Encyclopedia of Organic Gardening and similar reference texts became standard guides for a generation of gardeners. Rusty iron was not mentioned, not condemned, not discussed. The practice faded through silence, not argument. By the 1980s and the 1990s, every orchard guide defaulted to chelated iron products. Every extension bulletin and every garden center recommendation presented the same option. The alternative was not presented. It had been removed from the range of options. Warnings appeared about rust toxicity and heavy metal contamination. Despite iron being an essential nutrient, and despite rust being oxidized iron, not a toxic compound. The safety concerns were amplified without context and without comparison to the known safety profile of decades of traditional use. Modern gardening culture shifted towards science-based practices. The phrase science-based came to mean commercially tested products and methods validated by funded research. Free, improvised techniques became stigmatized as amateur and unserious. Younger orchardists and home fruit growers never encountered rusty iron in their education. Older knowledge holders were dismissed as outdated. The practice did not die from disproof. It died from being irrelevant to the new system. It was not disproven. It was simply reclassified from practice to folklore. Rusty iron is free. Waste metal. Garden centers cannot monetize it. There is no profit margin and no recurring revenue stream. A customer who learns to use scrap iron stops buying chelated products, and the transaction ends. The oxidation rate varies by iron source, by soil moisture, and by microbial activity. Nails oxidize differently than wire. Horseshoes oxidize differently than tools. This variability cannot be standardized for retail labeling requirements. A bottle of chelated iron lists precise percentages, while rust composition changes with every piece of metal. Commercial orchards use fertigation, liquid fertilizer delivered through irrigation systems, or foliar sprays applied by machine. Rusty nails cannot be sprayed and cannot be injected. The infrastructure built for modern orchard management cannot accommodate buried metal. Retail stores avoid recommending unpackaged, non-standardized materials because of legal liability. If a customer buries iron incorrectly and the tree dies from unrelated causes, the store faces exposure. Packaged products come with instructions, disclaimers, and insurance protection. There is no branding potential for rusty iron. Rusty iron cannot be trademarked. It cannot be patented. It cannot be differentiated. Any scrap metal performs the same function. This eliminates competitive advantage. No company can claim superiority. University research funding comes primarily from agrochemical companies. Studies focus on products those companies can sell. There is no funding mechanism for studying free alternatives. The research gap is not ideological. It is structural. As the practice faded, knowledge transfer broke. New orchardists never learned placement depth, 12 to 18 inches from feeder roots. They never learned timing, at planting or when symptoms appear. They never learned which species benefit most: apples, pears, and stone fruits in alkaline conditions. The information exists in archives and in agricultural texts from before 1960. But it does not exist in accessible modern guides. A solution that cannot be packaged cannot be recommended, even if it solves the problem. Climate change is raising soil pH in semi-arid regions. The American Southwest and the Mediterranean are drying. Reduced rainfall concentrates salts, and alkalinity increases. More orchards are entering the iron-deficient range. The problem is expanding. Between 2020 and 2023, commercial chelated iron prices increased by 150% to 200%. Supply chain disruptions, raw material costs, and energy costs for synthesis all contributed. The inputs required to make the inputs became expensive. Chelates require annual or biannual application. Over a fruit tree's productive lifespan of 20 to 30 years, the cumulative cost per tree ranges from $300 to $800. For a small backyard orchard of 10 trees, the cost for chelated iron alone ranges from $3,000 to $8,000. Rusty nails require one placement, with no reapplication unless symptoms return years later. In 2022, the war in Ukraine disrupted global fertilizer supply. Prices spiked across all categories, including nitrogen, phosphorus, and micronutrients. The crisis highlighted dependence on industrial inputs. Metallic iron requires no supply chain beyond local scrap, no manufacturing, and no international shipping. After the pandemic, interest in backyard fruit production surged. New orchardists planted trees, and many were unaware of iron chlorosis, how to recognize symptoms, or how to manage deficiency. The knowledge gap met the biological need. Rusty nails and wire are waste material, discarded metal destined for landfills or recycling. Repurposing them for orchard health closes a nutrient loop, without manufacturing and without additional energy input. Rusty iron is still used by permaculture practitioners, homesteaders, and organic orchardists who learned from pre-1960s sources or rediscovered the practice through experimentation. The knowledge persists at the margins. It is not extinct, only removed from visibility. The crisis revealed the cost of convenience, but the alternative had already been forgotten. Free iron supplementation corrects deficiency, increases yields, and lasts for years. Standard practice was documented in agricultural manuals, and it is now dismissed as folklore. Modern horticulture measures success in product consistency, application ease, and guaranteed analysis printed on labels. Rusty iron excels in metrics that have no shelf space, cost per year, waste utilization, and self-sufficiency for each tree. The practice is documented in historical agricultural texts and university archives, including pre-1960 USDA publications. The information was never lost. It was removed from accessible guides, from extension bulletins, and from the advice given to new orchardists. The biochemistry is unchanged. Chelation through rust still works. Iron deficiency still responds to bioavailable iron from any source. The trees do not know whether the iron came from a bottle or a nail. The infrastructure still exists. Scrap metal is abundant, discarded nails, old wire, broken tools. The material is available. The knowledge is not. The question is not whether we should bury rusty nails again. The question is, what else was optimized out of existence when self-sufficiency stopped being profitable? What other practices that required no transaction were quietly removed? What other solutions wait in archives while orchards depend on supply chains? The system that made orcharding convenient also made it dependent. Rusty iron did not stop working. We simply built a system that could not profit from it working, and then we forgot anyone ever used it at all. If this vault opened something for you, subscribe to Green Vault. We are uncovering the practices the system taught us to forget. The next vault opens soon.